Hello and welcome to Federal Government for the Fall 2021 semester. The purpose of this series of 3 micro-lectures is to set the stage for your efforts this semester. This week, you'll listen or view these videos, then complete the Week 1 deal reflection. See our Getting Started in GOVT2305 folder for the assignment and prompts. Before we dive into constitutional controversies this semester, it's important to understand some basics of how government and politics work, generally speaking. The first thing you need to know is that politics, which is often defined as who gets what, how, and when, politics arises from conflict. And the sources of political conflict are resources, who gets what, and values. How should we govern? What kind of society is best? Questions like that. This intersection of resources and values mix together to form a great deal of conflict. And like any conflict, there are winners and losers. We allow government to determine the outcome of political conflict. Consider a few examples. Healthcare. Should government provide for the basic health care of its citizens, like in other Western-style democracies, or should it be a private individual matter? Foreign policy. Should we spend our resources to aid other countries? What kind of international behaviors should we promote or condemn? What's our role in the world? Think about the pandemic. Should the government provide extended unemployment during a dangerous health crisis, or should benefits be cut to get the nation's economy rolling again? As you can see, there can be varying or conflicting views on how to proceed on these issues. And since the government is called upon to manage these kinds of political conflicts, we need to understand that government decides the winners and losers. So the rules or laws or policies that government makes can never be neutral or objective. Some group always wins, and some other person or some other group always loses. Now, how and why does the government get such significant power? Why do we allow it to manage political conflict? Government is allowed to be the arbiter of our political conflicts through its legitimacy. Legitimacy is the willingness of citizens to abide by government decisions. Legitimacy is derived from, in the American form, our form of government that is government by the people, representative democracy. That agreement, giving the right of rule and authority to a higher power, the government, comes from something called the social contract. The idea of the social contract comes to us from 2 English classical liberal philosophers, Thomas Hobbes in the 16th century and John Locke in the 17th. Both of these gentlemen were big influences on the founders. Both philosophers agreed that society comes together. People enter into a society under a social contract because individuals are self-interested, rational people who need order so that they can prosper. And when people enter into a social contract and agree to abide by a government's laws, the government, to be legitimate, must try to uphold and protect the values of the people. Now, the second way in which government is able to manage political conflict is through coercive force. This is the government's ability to threaten and compel citizens to follow the rules and to punish those who fall outside of the social contract. This could be as minimal as a library fine, to the maximum of the death penalty, and everything in between. In order to be effective, governments need both legitimacy and coercive force. With both of those, government is able to make rules or laws or policies. And in doing so, they are determining the winners of political conflict. Again, remember, it's important to understand that those determinations are never neutral, they are never objective. Rules help some groups and disadvantage others. Sometimes this can be abundantly obvious, like Jim Crow laws post-Civil War. But oftentimes they can be more nuanced. For example, consider new state-level laws that restrict early voting or require certain types of voter ID over others. Who benefits? Who is disadvantaged? As a rulemaker, the government enacts two main types of rules. The first of these are structural rules. These are the rules of the game. In our case, the United States' structural rules come from the Constitution. It's the how of government, its organization, its powers, its procedures. As the name suggests, these rules deal with the structure or foundation or building blocks of our system of government. So for example, a minor one, Article 2, Section 3 mandates that the president must, from time to time, report on the state of the union. It doesn't say that the president has to hold a prime-time televised speech, but that yearly he has to report to Congress. Thomas Jefferson used to write a letter and send it by courier to the Congress. Today it's become a media spectacle. How about this structural rule, dealing with representation? Every state, according to the Constitution, gets 2 senators for a total of 100 over 50 states. That means that the 8 states of the mountain region, Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, they get 16 senators for its roughly 20 million people. By contrast, California gets 2 senators for its roughly 40 million people. Is it fair? Maybe, maybe not, but according to the rules, that's the way things work. These structural rules are what you are going to focus on this semester as you work through contemporary constitutional controversies over the rules of the game. Should they be changed? Where and how? The second type of rule is a policy rule, or just a policy. Policies are the decisions of government institutions that are made about political questions of the day. And these change far more frequently than structural rules do. For example, the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution established a federal income tax. Since it's constitutional, it's a structural rule. But there are tons of policy implications. How to tax, who to tax, how often to tax. These are policy rules. And whoever's in power politically gets to determine those policies. So as you may well know, Republicans tend to favor decreased taxes for the wealthy to spur investment in economic growth. Democrats tend to prefer higher taxation on the wealthy. A policy decision to reduce taxes on the wealthy can hurt the middle class, because the middle class then bears the brunt of paying the shortfall. Such a decision is a policy rule. Again, both types of rules, both structural and policy, are always subjective. And you need to look at any rule and consider who the winners and losers are, even if it wasn't intended to have somebody lose. This ends part 1. In part 2, we'll explore the evolution of our form of democracy and the fundamental principles that form its foundation.